I mean, what I remember from that game is Richard Sherman. And there were so many parts to that like, obviously were just, it's hilarious. I'm just ticked off I never got a Snickers commercial out of it. I tried to sell it so badly to Mars and they weren't listening to me and whatever.
You hear that, Snickers? She needs a commercial here.
And even when he went to San Francisco, I tried to resell it where it was like, he's angry, he's yelling at me, I give him a Snickers, and he's in a 49ers uniform. Fine, I'll make up commercials now too. Add it to my repertoire.
Well, I know you've addressed it many times, but maybe people that haven't heard that you've addressed it, this is our opportunity here on Danger Talk. But I'm a fan of football and women, So when
he's a huge Seahawks fan, just so you know,
the biggest. And so when he said that to you and he was kind of shouting and all jacked up from the game, just whatever. And I think of you as like this boss, like you're not like the gals I know, So I remember thinking like that wasn't a big deal. And then the way it got ran with, I just kept thinking like they're making her sound like she's some delicate flower. Like she's been in this business for a long time. She probably doesn't care. So what did you care? Were you offended? Were you like, hey, why did he yell at me? Or
no, honestly, I thought it was awesome. The only thing that many things I've said this before, one of the things that I was annoyed about was myself, shocker in the ballroom, but I was, because I remember when it was happening that I thought to myself, holy cow, my next question better be a good one. And I'm still trying to follow up with what he's saying. But I had known that he was not a fan of Michael Crabtree. He had discussed that in a production meeting with myself and the announcers. So I wasn't shocked. But what I was worried about as that was happening is, holy crap, what am I asking for a second question? And I don't want people to think he's yelling at me, because he's not, because he's awesome. So then when he stopped and he said, don't you ever talk about me again? I was like, who's talking about me? Now, as I've discussed with other people, that wasn't a terrible question, but what I want to like blow my brains out about is my stupid look on my face when I did it. I was talking about you. Like, why do you have to ask it that way? Just say, I should have done it over. And then what is not in my comfort zone to do, I think maybe at that time, but would be now, is right away they pulled me off of him. And I wanted to ask a follow-up question about actually what it was going to be like to then, be matched up against the Denver Broncos in the Super Bowl, playing in New York. And what does that moment mean to him? And they just said, go to Joe, because they panicked. And I should have been like, no, I got one more. And this is what it is. So I'm mad at myself.
Well, I think first of all, I think the moment was just so absolutely nuts. I mean, the stadium, I couldn't hear the people next to me. It was so crazy and so loud. I just remember Colin throwing the ball up, and I'm like, they just tried Sherm, and he goes back and tips it back up in the air, and Malcolm catches it. Just the electricity in the stadium. I think everybody was losing. I don't even think. I think everybody in that moment was just chaotic. I've never been. Yeah. I've been in some crazy games and crazy matchups and loud stadiums, but there's nothing like Seattle being in that stadium.
No.
And I wasn't mad about it at all. I was like, no, Richard Sherman's my guy. I love him. Erin Andrews doesn't care. But then the second that Richard Sherman went to San Francisco, I was like, man, that guy's the worst. And he yelled at Erin Andrews. I don't need this.
No, but what's interesting is I was just thinking to myself, my gosh, I didn't interview Russell after that game, but in an NFC Championship situation, I'm not allowed, because we knew that Russell was going to go up on the trophy stand, probably with Terry Bradshaw. So they were like, Russell's off limits. Get somebody else. And I was just thinking, why didn't I talk to you? But that's why.
Well, one of my favorite moments about that game too was, being up there on stage with Terry Bradshaw. I remember Paul Allen standing next to me.
Aww.
And I remember, them playing Frank Sinatra and everything. I was talking to Terry, and I started asking him. I was so zoned in the moment. I said, Terry, how do we get this done? How do we win the whole thing? And he started giving me this advice. I'm not going to tell everybody the advice, because I'm still in the midst of trying to win another Super Bowl right now. So I'm not going to give you all the secrets right now. Okay, Erin, this will be maybe your next interview for me. But I'll never forget just that moment, that stillness. As everything was going so chaotic, I felt so still in that moment. And I think life flashes in front of you, where everything you've worked for, it's right here. It's right now. And so as an athlete, as a player, as somebody who ever wants to be great at anything, I think there's these moments in time that you fully capture and you fully become still. And that was one of them. I remember Terry And Jeff, you know Terry really well too, actually. But I think that moment of stillness was really pure for me. And then next thing I know, I'm singing Frank Sinatra out loud, and Paul Allen kind of raps, kind of grabs my arm and is like, "You like Frankie Frank? You like Frank?" And I said, "Yeah, my dad used to sing to him all the time." Crazy story. The next morning I get up, I get the doorbell rings, and all of a sudden I had this massive box of Frank Sinatra stuff, and it just those moments like that are just really special, And I think back to that. So that game really meant a lot to me. Obviously, my career and everything else, but I think also too just how everything comes to fruition, everything you've ever worked for, and so
Yeah.
that was a special night. And I'm glad Richard Sherman tipped that ball up. That's for sure.
Wow.
So that was
Was
pretty
that
cool.
ball catchable, by the way? Like, can we just go back and talk about it? Because I always think about Richard Sherman's play and the interview. Would he have been able to get that? Was he
You talking about
going to get
Crabtree?
that?
You talking
Yeah,
about Crabtree?
Crabtree.
Yeah, I mean Crabtree's got great. I mean, you've seen him in college and all the things
Yeah.
he's done in the NFL. I mean, he's got unbelievable, catching skills, ball skills to catch the football. So for Sherm to be able to do that and turn the way he did and knock it backwards and knock it up, and ironically, I think Sherm did that actually several weeks before in New York. We were already beaten, the Giants pretty good, but they
Yeah.
threw a ball down the right sideline, very similar to that, I believe. Eli did, and Sherm tipped it back, and I think Earl had caught it, I believe, but it looked very similar. That was several weeks before, and ironically, I had told Coach Carroll, early that week, I said, the crazy thing is we get to play in New York, and hopefully we get to come back to New York again. And sure enough, we were able to go back to New York again. So those moments are like that are really special. So,
And it wasn't even cold in that Super Bowl. They had the heaters on the bench, and I was sweating in my puffer coat. And I was like, I thought this was going to be like a whole snow situation.
I was at that game, and they gave all the fans like this big like winter pack, like a whole thing that had all this extra stuff because they're like people are going to be freezing, and so people were taking gear off like when they came into the stadium. And a lot of people took their Broncos jerseys off and set them on fire after that game also.
After the first play that went over his head, right? It was like, oh boy. Didn't New York get dumped on really bad the next day? I think the snow came the next day.
It was supposed to rain. It was supposed to snow that morning, that day of the game.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it kicked past to the next day.
Crazy.
And I remember being up still. It was probably 4:30 in the morning. I was still up from the night before. We just up the whole night, and there was snow just coming down.
I want to hear about that.
Yeah, same. Super.
Yeah. What were you up doing, Russ?
Controversial.
Celebrating
the whole. It was just snowing like crazy. It was an amazing night, and I actually had to do an interview at 5:30. For I don't know, one of those morning shows, and I just remember just how bad it was, and it was. We were barely able to get out of there. Flying out the next morning to go back to Seattle. So it was actually definitely a cool day, and we got lucky that night in the sense that the moon was right there, right in the middle. There's no snow. It was about 52 degrees. I think it was actually colder in Seattle than it was even in New York. So it was a special day for us.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN Plus.